You've got shit. I've got shit. We've all got shit. So let's therapize that shit with your host, me, Joy Gerhard. Joy Gerhard. Please note, I am not a therapist. I cannot and do not diagnose anyone or prescribe anything. This is just me, someone who struggles with mental illness, emotions, and intrusive thoughts, sharing with me, someone who struggles with mental illness, emotions, and intrusive thoughts, sharing what skills I've used and how I've used them. Also, trigger warning, in this podcast, I talk about sensitive topics including mental illness, suicidal ideation, self-harm, rape, childhood sexual assault, trauma, and more. Self-harm, rape, childhood sexual assault, trauma, and more. I also swear here and there, so listener discretion is advised. If you're new to the podcast, some context for you. I've gotten a ton of value out of doing group therapy and watching others process their shit. In group, I can see other people's patterns and behaviors much more clearly because they aren't my patterns and behaviors, but rather they're adjacent to mine. It's such a relief. I want to share this relief with you via this podcast, wherein I practice skill episode. I typically do an introduction and provide some context. Then I play a recording of me actively dealing with shit. This isn't me talking about psychology or theories. I'm actually in distress, having strong emotions and strong urges. You're going to hear me crying, angry, numb, never to stay there. So stick with me, and we'll actually come out on the other side by the end of the episode. Alrighty, let's hop to it. Welcome. It's been a couple weeks, and there's a reason for that. I have a type of episode that is typical, because the last couple episodes have also been atypical. I know I have in my introduction trigger warnings and whatnot, and I'm going to reiterate a massive trigger warning for self-harm and also medical gaslighting. All right, so I just got out of a 12-day stint in a psych hospital, and I figured I would do an episode about my time there. And then I had the thought that in real time, as you're using them, and just talking about your time in the psych hospital doesn't really do that. And my sister Ruth, hi Ruth, reminded me that this podcast can also be a way to normalize and validate and educate. It doesn't have to be this very narrow thing. Addressed that concern. And then I was thinking about, I saw a social worker in the ER who had suggested that I look into volunteering with an LGBTQ youth organization or something. And I'd recently given myself and said, what the fuck could I possibly have to offer queer youth? What parent would look at me and say, yes, this is the sort of person I want to leave my child with? And similarly, I have the same thought about what the fuck could I possibly have to offer anybody via this podcast as someone who just spent almost 2 weeks in a psych hospital. Again, I mean, I spent a week back in, I think it was April of 2021, and then another week in August of 2021. So this is my third time. And the social worker responded with, hey, look, you're only hurting yourself. You're not hurting anyone else. And you did exactly what you're supposed to do. You used all the skills you had available to you. And when your distress turned out to be greater than what your skills could manage, you took yourself to the hospital to keep yourself safe. And that's exactly what you're supposed to do. So, I guess possibly I have something to offer around. I have something to offer around what that experience was like, whether it's in the form of validation to those who've already been in a psych hospital, or whether it's to normalize psych hospitals for folks who've never been in one. I've been doing an unofficial poll of my friends and family asking what informs their understanding of what psych hospitals are like, aside from knowing me and knowing my experience. And I've also been asking myself, before having gone into a psych hospital, where do my assumptions about them come from? Because I think everybody has assumptions about them. And like right off the top, it's movies like Girl Interrupted, or 12 Monkeys, or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest being I think probably the biggest classic example. And also like A Beautiful Mind, springs to Gothica, Shutter Island, Short Term 12, and to a lesser extent, 28 Days, which is about alcohol or substance abuse rehab. But I think there's a lot of similarities between a residential rehab facility and a psych hospitalization. Yeah. So I'm interested in interrogating those forms of media and the assumptions that we make about mental illness and psych hospitals based off of those forms of media. Like ask where they come from and why did I think those were correct? Yeah. And another thing I've been thinking about at length is, so I have my inner circle of people who knew I was there and know me like intimately in terms of knowing about my mental health and everything else. But then I was thinking, as I was in the psych hospital, about what it would be like to tell somebody who's more removed that, hey, I just got out of 12 days in a psych hospital. Because I'm anticipating judgment. I'm anticipating, some sort of negative reaction. And how different that would be if I were saying, hey, I just got out of 12 days in like the ICU, or 12 days in a burn unit, or 12 days in a cardiac unit, and how I would explain. Whereas when I tell people that I'm in a psych ward, or that I've been in a psych ward for 12 days, I am anticipating the reaction to be, oh my God, what's wrong with you? Even if they don't voice that and say it out loud. And I think similarly, like 12 days in a hospital, I would absolutely default to, oh my God, are you okay? And I'm aware, despite having been in psych hospitals multiple times, that my reaction is different if somebody told me that they just got out of a psych hospital. I've also been thinking about what creates that kind of or like reaction. And I think there's an assumption that if you're in a psych hospital, it's involuntary. And that which kind of makes it more, I mean, it is an extension of the carceral state. It's an extension of incarceration if you're going involuntarily. And then the reaction is more like having somebody say, hey, I just spent 12 days in prison. But not all of the times that I've been admitted, it's been voluntary. And I actually don't have any experience with involuntary, so I really can't speak to that. But yeah, I do think that there is an assumption that no one goes to a psych hospital voluntarily, which is not the case. So yeah, I want to talk about those assumptions a bit, and I want to get into kind of the details of what so yeah, I want to talk about those assumptions a bit, and I want to get into kind of the details of what my experience was like this time around, why I voluntarily admitted myself a bit, and I want to get into kind of the details of what my experience was like this time around, why I voluntarily admitted myself. But I also really do want to destigmatize I voluntarily admitted myself. But I also really do want to destigmatize that experience, I guess. I'm not planning on getting into a specific skill or practicing a specific skill here. I'm going to mention some skills that I used while in the psych ward. Most of the skills that I reference are from the DBT manual by Marsha Linehan. And DBT stands for Dialectic Therapy Modality of Choice. I've linked the DBT manual in the description, both a link for a PDF form and where you can buy a hard copy. And I'll be referencing handouts from various modules. There are 4 modules: emotion regulation and distress tolerance. And the handouts therein are numbered. So when I mention a handout that I'm referencing, I'll say something like, "This is from Interpersonal Effectiveness, Handout 5." Or whatever, so you can follow along if you're. Before I get into the rest of this, I want to give a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters, which are my sisters, Anne and Ruth. And they're the reason that this podcast exists for public consumption. So support in a variety of ways, but in particular for your Patreon support. And if you, dear listener, would like to support this podcast, the link to my Patreon is in the description, and I will give you a shout out on episodes as well, unless you prefer to remain anonymous. All right, psych hospitalization, and similar to the last couple episodes, this is going to be unedited, really. I'm just going to talk. And kind of some of the stories of my time there. So let's start with what happened. So for the last, at this point, I've been dealing with pelvic pain, chronic pelvic pain. That's really, really fucking intense. It feels like a UTI that's trying to kill me, but every time I have that intense pain, I will go and I will submit a urine sample. It always comes. It doesn't turn out to be any of the other kind of painful vaginal conditions like vaginismus or yeast infection or any STD, and a CT scan, is it a laparoscopy? Sticking a camera up the bladder to make sure that it's not bladder cancer. I've had regular ultrasounds, transvaginal ultrasounds, ruling out any like pathology. It kind of landed on that I have pelvic floor spasm, which is, think like a Charlie horse, but in your pelvis. And there's no amount of stretching or relaxation techniques that make it go away. It doesn't respond to any typical pain. It doesn't respond to morphine or oxycodone or hydromorphone or Certainly not like Valium or muscle relaxers. I've been given in one instance multiple doses of fentanyl. And I think I talked about this actually in the previous one before that. So that would be episodes 44 or 43. It also doesn't respond to physical therapy. I've had pelvic floor physical therapy extensively over multiple years. A new flare-up happened, and it was right after, I've been getting treated every 6 months with Botox injections, and that has handled it. It doesn't do anything, like if I'm in a flare-up and going and getting injections while in a flare-up doesn't do anything. Until now, I had injections July 30th. Today, I'm recording this on September 1st of 2025. And within 2 or 3 weeks, I was going into spasm. And that's what I recorded in my previous episode about chronic pain and acceptance around. This has never happened before. And I went to the ER. I spent 22 hours in the ER, and they gave me, so many different ER. And they gave me, so many different pain medications intravenously. And also a few oral ones that I don't remember. I don't remember most of what they gave me. I don't remember the names. And it did fuck all. Absolutely nothing. So they sent me home, and it did fuck all. Absolutely nothing. So they sent me home, and then about 2 days later, so it was like 3 o'clock, it was Monday, late Monday night, which is really more like Tuesday morning. I drove myself back to the ER because the pain was like, the previous ER, I would say that my pain was like 7 spiking to 9, 7 spiking to 8, sometimes 9. Now we're talking 12 out of 10. And with that comes really, really, really intense suicidal ideation, because I don't want to live with pain that is that bad. So I get to the psych hospital. They do their triage screening questions. They send me back to like put on a hospital gown, and they send me back to a psych bathroom. And psych bathrooms look different than regular bathrooms. Because a key function too of psych bathrooms is to prevent people from being able to die by suicide. And most of that they accomplish by not allowing any surface. There's nothing you can tie anything onto. And so I'm looking around, and I'm looking at the way the handholds are configured, and how they have a sheet of metal welded to them so that you can't loop anything around them. They're kind of like a semicircle, so you can't tie anything to it. I'm like, oh no, I'm getting my phone taken away, and I'm getting put under a psych hold. Now, my previous ER visit, just a couple days before, wasn't a psych hold. I mean, I guess it was officially, but they didn't. And I was allowed to keep my phone on me the entire time. But this time I'm like, oh dear, if we're starting in a psych bathroom, this means like this is getting real. And I knew this because of my previous experiences in psych hospitals. So I text a friend of mine who's kind of like my medical, hey, alert the brain trust. And she already had a list of like the people that I'm in constant communication with that I text regularly who would miss me if I went into a psych hospital for any length of time. I was like, they're going to take my phone away in a minute. Alert the brain trust, let everybody know. Let my mom know, and she'll get a hold of my sisters, and I will be in touch with you as soon as I can. And then they took me into a room I met with the doctor. The doctor said, hey, all of the pain meds you've tried before are working along this kind of neurological pathway. We're going to try another pathway, and we're going to give you ketamine. Ketamine is a fucking trip. And I know that there are people who really enjoy it, like who find the experience to be pleasant. Its initial usage was as a horse tranquilizer. Tranquilizer, really. My experience of being given a sedative is anesthesia prior to like getting my Botox injections, because I do those while I'm under anesthesia. And to be clear, like the Botox injections, I get them through the vagina for my pelvic floor. So with a 6-inch long needle, I've done it awake. It's absolutely brutal doing it awake. It's torture. It's essentially medically sanctioned torture. It's absolutely horrible. So when I have the opportunity or the chance, I do it in the OR. So when I have the opportunity or the chance, I do it in the OR under anesthesia, and it's fine. And my experience of being given a sedative is like, oh, I'm starting to feel it. And now I'm waking up in another room after, like in the recovery area. So ketamine was not like that in the recovery area. So ketamine was not like that. Ketamine was, and they didn't tell me any of the information about what side effects to expect, nothing. They're just like, we're going to give you ketamine. And I was like, okay, let's throw literally every fucking thing at the wall and see what sticks. Let's throw literally every fucking thing at the wall and see what sticks. So right away, it felt like I was going to fall through my bed, my hospital bed. It felt like that scene from Get Out where the main character is being hypnotized and he like falls through the recliner he's sitting in. And it felt like that. It felt like the bed was folding me up inside it. And the far wall of my room was getting farther away while my feet, like where my feet are in the bed, was getting closer side of me. Their heads were getting bigger while their bodies were getting smaller. When I tried to talk, I felt like I was speaking whale. And when they talked, they also sounded like they were speaking whale. And I couldn't move my arms, and I was instantly nauseous, and instantly it felt like I was seasick, like I was on a boat in a totally storm-swept ocean. They gave me one of those like bag situations so that you could throw up if I needed to. Where my bed was, there was a big kind of support pillar within reach, and I stuck my foot through the bars of the like kind of the side of the bed where they, keeps you from falling out. I stuck my foot through that and touched the support pillar, which I know is a useful thing to do if you're hungover or if you're seasick you're going to sleep. And I just moaned and laid there for 3 hours thinking I was going to puke my brains out. And I never did. And I kept thinking about that quote, that famous idiom or whatever about seasickness, that at first you're afraid you're going to die and then you're afraid you're not going to. Couldn't have told you which was worse, the pelvic pain or the ketamine. It's a toss-up. It did knock the pain out briefly for like 3 hours. And then as soon as the nausea passed, and I guess the ketamine wore off, the pain came back. Not great. In the ER, a couple days before, I'd met with a social worker because I was having suicidal ideation. They require that. She wasn't particularly helpful, and she was the same person when I came back. Still not particularly helpful. She was saying, hey, I think we should send you to a psych ward because there they can treat this as the result of trauma, because that's anyone's best guess as to what is causing this, that it's because of the sexual assaults that I've experienced. She's like, if we can treat your mind in a psych hospital, maybe that will lessen your pain, your physical pain. Maybe that will lessen your pain, your physical pain. And I was like, well, it's better than being sent at home because I'm not safe if I go home in terms of like having access to self-harm and pills that I can overdose on and whatnot. Pills that I can overdose on and whatnot. Trigger warning for suicidal ideation. I should have put that at the top. I only put self-harm, but here we are. So I was like, yeah, sure, go ahead and admit me. So they put me in. I was like, yeah, sure, go ahead and admit me. So they put me in an ambulance. They actually like tie my wrists down and my feet. That's never happened before when I've gotten transferred from ERs to psych hospitals. And up I go. And I do the whole intake and whatever, and I'm like zonked out of my and up I go. And I do the whole intake and whatever, and I'm like zonked out of my mind. For like the first 24 hours that I'm in there. They put me in a room by myself, like my own bedroom. And it's fucking freezing cold, and there's really nothing they can do about that for some reason. And it's fucking freezing cold, and there's really nothing they can do about that for some reason. Like the thermostat in that room is just wonky, and it's always freezing. And I cannot get warm. And I don't have access to my regular meds, so I also can't sleep, because I need meds to sleep. So I also can't sleep, because I need meds to sleep. And I think I finally fell asleep at something like 5 or 6 in the morning. I'm then woken up at like 7:30 with a nurse sticking a needle in my arm to take a blood draw. And I'm like, fucking again? Because a nurse sticking a needle in my arm to take a blood draw. And I'm like, fucking again? Because this happened the previous time that I was admitted. The first day there, you wake up to them putting a needle in your arm. I'm like, this is not safe. Because I think I would be justified in slugging you if I ever woke up anywhere. To someone putting a needle in my arm, that feels like justifiable, like self-defense. But I skipped breakfast. I think I skipped lunch. I didn't go to any group in the morning or in the afternoon. And I think I finally was awake and functional enough by dinner to go to dinner and then go to the evening groups. And that would have been Wednesday. Meals. There's like TV time. There's, various activities and whatnot. Friday, it is announced that a couple people have COVID and they've been quarantined. And it is recommended that all of us wear masks. All of the patients get to wear there's just the cheaper ones, the kind of your standard, what you'd see in like the kind that don't have their own molded shape. They're just pleated. And normally there's a nose piece in it, a piece of metal, piece out. And so all the rest of us are wearing those. And that's on Friday, and I start to feel ill. I had been transferred that morning into a room with a roommate. She is lovely, forced to be constantly around another person. So it was kind of stressful to know that I was now going to have a roommate. And I start to feel ill, and I try to low-key ask for a COVID test. I don't want to alarm anybody, so we're not going to give you a COVID test. And I start to feel worse, and my ears are aching, my throat is super, super sore, my lymph nodes are on fire. And I go back to the nurse's station, and they say, go talk to the med window. Ask them, and they say, go talk to the nurse's station. So I go back to the nurse's station. And they're like, we have to have a doctor's order to give you a COVID test. So this is Friday. And they're like, the doctor will be in tomorrow. And she'll do something then. So I see the doctor the next morning. She looks at everything. She looks at my throat, which is super sore, and she says it's normal. She looks at my ears, which are super sore, and she says they're normal. She examines my lymph nodes, which are super sore, and she said those are normal. She does a temperature reading, and it's normal. And then she's like, okay, well, we'll give you a COVID test just to be on the safe side. And it turns out positive. But the way I find out, the roommate starts packing up her stuff to leave, to get switched to a different room. They told my roommate that I was positive before they told me. And it took multiple hours of me asking, like, hey, am I positive? Like, what's the deal here? Before finally somebody says, yes, you are positive. Quarantined in that room by myself, which I'm actually not mad about. Being by myself is fine. But being stuck in a room for 8 days was a little on the rough side. But I had access to jigsaw puzzles and wireless headphones where I could listen to the radio. They brought to me. They brought my meds to me. Yeah. And then finally, after 12 days in the psych hospital and 8 days of those quarantined, I was released, still COVID positive. Quarantined. I was released, still COVID positive. And as far as I know, I'm still COVID positive. That was 2 days ago was my release. I had a COVID test on my last day. And it was still showing positive. Yeah. Yeah. I feel fine, for the most part. But I thought I would share with you some of my notes about my time in this space. So here are some things. Here's some just weird design features or cultural differences of psych wards that I have noticed from the three. So I've been in one psych ward that I have noticed from the three. So I've been in one psych ward back in 2021, and then my second time in 2021 was a place that I was then sent back to just now, like a couple weeks ago, the 12 days. So I've only been in two psych wards, but with 3 different visits. 12 days. So I've only been in 2 psych wards, but with 3 different visits. So here's what's fun about psych wards. All the staff have walkie-talkies. And they do rounds every 15 minutes and locate every single patient on each round. They have a clipboard with every single patient on each round. They have a clipboard with a face shot. Is that what it's headshot? There we go. Of all of the patients and their names. And they go and they locate each person every 15 minutes. And if you're in your room, they have to physically step into our room to check that every 15 minutes. And if you're in your room, they have to physically step into our room to check that we're in there. The doors. Patients aren't allowed to ever close the doors. So at best, they can be cracked like 2 inches. But for the most part, they're open or open like several feet. Hung in the standard three hinge setup because you can open the door, put like a sheet or a blanket through between the hinges, close the door, and then use that as a way to hang oneself. The door handles are slanted so that you can't tie anything around in the ceiling with tearaway hooks that are like a ball and socket that come off when you tug on the shower curtain. The safety handholds in the bathroom end up being more like shelves. There's a strip of metal that's welded to them so nothing can be tied around them. Every piece of furniture is bolted to the floors and the walls so that nothing can be tied around them or slipped behind them. In the rooms for the psych patients, there's, a bed that's basically on an elevated box of plywood. And that's bolted to the floor. There's nightstands with, a shelf, a taller sort of nightstand situation. It's just open shelving for like you to keep your clothes in and stuff. There's nothing with there's no cabinets with closed doors or anything with drawers. Everything's open. There's also a desk that's just a basic, top and sides, and then shares. For meals, of course, there's no plastic knives at meals. There are plastic forks and spoons that are very, very soft plastic. The pictures in the hallways are bolted to the walls. All the exit doors are magnetized cards to get through them. Patients aren't allowed to have clothes with belts or like drawstrings, no shoes with shoelaces. Patients can only shave their faces, like we can't shave our bodies, and they can only shave their faces while being observed by staff. Or a star bit to unscrew, so they can't be unscrewed by patients. And there wasn't anybody there during my time who was put on, well, that's not true. There were a couple people who were put on a one-to-one, which is where there is a staff member that follows you around 24 hours a day and is always within arm's reach of you. I mean, a couple times, if you have done something, like if you're in imminent danger of hurting yourself or hurting somebody else, or you are drugged to the point where you are super vulnerable from other patients, they will have you on a one-to-one. And only once have I been called a suicide jacket, which is a tunic. That's the word. With Velcros down the sides. You're not allowed to wear any undergarments, and it's made of really thick fabric it's Velcroed at the seams. And they take out your shower curtain, and instead of having a bathroom door, there's just a curtain there and they take that down as well. And they take away all your bedding. So no sheets or blankets. They give you a suicide blanket, which is another really heavy, and you can't tie it into a knot. So those are some of the weird, like, design features. What's like actually day to day? So the day starts, usually people are awoken by the staff going through the halls yelling breakfast time. And so we all have breakfast in the cafeteria. There is food that is prepped, probably on the lower floors of the hospital, but it's not part of the psych. Food that is prepped, probably on the lower floors of the hospital, but it's not part of the psych ward. And brought up, and everybody gets a tray and a fork and a spoon made out of plastic. We're served our meals, and you can say, I want everything, or I just want some of what is being served. The food's actually pretty good. You can say, I want everything, or I just want some of what is being served. The food's actually pretty good. It's not horrible. If you're not picky, it's fine. And a little salt and pepper never made anything worse. And then there's standard juice and coffee. Standard juice and coffee available. We have our breakfast. We sit at the tables there. And then after that, it's med time. And so everybody lines up. Or, I mean, typically I just go back to my room and I wait until the med line gets really short, and then I wander out. And you go and you get your meds. And typically it's like the single serving medication that's like in a plastic foil situation, and they'll read off the meds as they pop them out into a little cup, and then you shoot it with water, and they observe you do that. Usually there's, like 15 minutes between various chunks of time, or like scheduled things. There's morning group where everybody gets a worksheet that's like, how are you feeling this morning? Like emotionally, how are you feeling physically? What are your goals for the day? Make it something like really doable. And then on the back side, it's like, what's your scale of where's your anxiety? Where's your depression? Where's your suicidal ideation? Are you seeing anything that's not there, etc.? We fill all of that out, and we go around group and we share our goals and how we're feeling. And usually there's like a series, for each day, there's like a topic. So sometimes it's emotion or communication, or those are the only two I can think of right now. And there'll be like icebreaker questions of, like, what's your favorite, like your favorite soul food or like self-soothing food? Like your favorite soul food or like self-soothing food. What's your favorite movie, or like what is a song that gets you amped up and like motivated, or and stuff like that. And so we'll go around and share those things. And then usually there's things. And then usually there's snack time. And there's a little kind of small kitchenette where snacks are given out, and it's usually like yogurt, pretzels, fruit cups, oatmeal, oatmeal, like instant oatmeal. Sometimes there's ice cream. Sometimes there's like little snack bags of popcorn. Sometimes there's fresh fruit, like a banana or an orange. And then there's another group, and then it's lunchtime. Lunchtime is pretty much the same as breakfast, just, different food. And then after lunch, sometimes there are some people who have meds at lunchtime, but most people do not. And then there's another group, snack time, and then there's another group, and then there's usually like TV or craft time, and then there's dinner, and then there's another group, and then there's snack time, and then there's kind of like free time until evening meds, and then there's snack time, and then there's bed. Are varied. There's all sorts of different groups. There was at this one, 3 days a week, a woman would come with a bunch of different instruments. So like she had like a buffalo drum and a little carved wooden frog that when you hit it with go up and down its spine with a tongue drum, which is made out of metal, and it's a type of steel drum. She brings a ukulele, she brings a guitar, and has everybody go around and play one of the instruments kind of in a way that's how they're feeling today, like playing sounds that how they're feeling today, like playing sounds that represent how they feel, and then have people get to guess like how you're feeling based off of what sounds you made. And then we'll like sing a song. She has printouts of songs and we'll sing a song together, or do like mindful listening of a song, and she'll take requests and or do like mindful listening of a song, and she'll take requests, and we just jam for an hour. There's like craft groups or art groups where we'll be given a prompt and we'll get to use watercolor or pastels or marker. Given a prompt and we'll get to use watercolor or pastels or markers or whatever to draw based on that prompt. There's educational groups where you're like getting hang on, I lost my train of thought. Like here's let's talk about anger and how to regulate anger. Let's talk about how to make requests. Here's an educational group about medication and like the things you should always know about your medication, like name and its brand name, and what is your dosage, and what time of day do you take it, and what are the side effects and whatnot. There are groups that talk about like coping skills or different like distress tolerance, how to set boundaries, that sort of thing. Yeah, and then there's a TV room where they have a list of the movies that they have. There are never any horror movies, which I'm really upset. There's always like in that room, there's always a bunch of like coloring book pages that are just like not in books, but just free handouts, and like crossword puzzles and Sudoku puzzles, which are my favorite. I just went and got a stash of them, and that's what I did while I was quarantined. There's also jigsaw puzzles. We're not allowed to use ballpoint pens or pencils. We all use markers. What What else is noteworthy? Oh, also, there's a psychiatrist there. He comes around every morning and checks. They also do like blood pressure, your pulse rate and oxygen, and your temperature. Because they're amping people up on the meds really fucking fast. That's part of what the point of psych hospitalizations are, is to get you on meds quickly. And under normal circumstances out in the world, your psychiatrist is like, okay, we're going to start weeks, and then we're going to move you up to 30 milligrams. And eventually we're going to get you to 200, but it's going to take 6 months to do it. Psych hospitals will do it in a week. And they're monitoring you constantly to make sure you don't have any adverse effects. Let's see what else. Patients are also allowed to like go take a nap. Nobody forces you to go to group. Nobody forces you to go to meals even. They do monitor if you're eating. There's somebody who sits in there and pays attention to who's there and who's not there in the dining hall, and then monitors they sit near the trash can, so when you go to throw your food out, they see left on your plate so that they can monitor how much you're eating. They also have like nurses who go around and they will do their screening questions a couple times a day of like, what's your anxiety, 0 to 10? What's your depression, 0 to 10? Are you hearing or seeing anything that's not there? Those sorts of questions. And, there's also a medical doctor who comes in. She's the one who I saw about COVID. So there's like a little mini exam room with the ability tests and stuff. There's also a portable x-ray machine that can be brought in. My stomach was x-rayed while I was there because I didn't have a bowel movement for 8 days. And that's more information than I'm sure you wanted to know about me. Yeah, and there's they do have 2 phones that are bolted to the wall with very, very short cords. And so you can receive phone calls and you can call out. You're not allowed to make or receive calls during group time or meal times, but you can call pretty much any other time of day up until it's lights out. Calls are kept to 10 minutes so that other people can use the phone, but you can go longer if nobody is waiting in line. They do take pretty much all your belongings and they go through all of them when you get there. Me, I didn't have anything. I had like my purse. It's not a purse. It's an what was in there. I was allowed to keep my chapstick and my night guard that I used when I grind my teeth at night, and a pair of socks. But they kept my phone. Like, nobody gets to keep their phone. Yeah. You're also assigned a caseworker. Mine ended up being 72 hours is 3 days, and mine ended up being 6 days. And the case manager comes in and asks you like what your goals are for while you're there and what you hope to achieve by the time you're discharged and what you need support around to be discharged, like out in the world. And your casework will set up appointments with, necessary people. Like for me, I needed an appointment with my gynecologist to talk about my pelvic pain. And I need water. Hang on. Like for me, I needed an appointment with my gynecologist to talk about my pelvic pain. And I need water. Hang on. She also set up an appointment with a caseworker at a community mental health facility. She also set up an appointment with a caseworker at a community mental health facility that I'm already working with, but I just didn't have a case manager there. I made sure I had an appointment with a caseworker at a community mental health facility that I'm already working with, but I just didn't have a case manager there. I made sure I had an appointment with my therapist and with my DBT group. Blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of like what is typical, I gather. Yeah, and for the most part, like, it's pretty chill. I mean, yeah, sometimes there's random crying. Now I've been in a psych ward almost 4 weeks. Over all of my times combined, it's been about 4 weeks. And I never saw code gray until I saw 2 in one day during my most recent one. And a code gray is when staff has the patient is actually harming someone else or themselves. And what that looked like. And I was actually in a great position. My room was at the very end of the hall, facing down the hall. All the other rooms are off the hall, like, facing the opposite wall of the hallway. But I could see the entire of these code grays. One of them was a kind of a younger dude, probably late teens, early 20s, had thrown a chair against a window and then thrown a punch at a staff member. And he was yelling, and kicking, trying to get out of the doors, and went around and did like a bear hug of his upper body. And then another person came down and did a bear hug of his legs. And then the person who was doing the bear hug up above took his arms and put them behind his back and then bear hugged his arms behind his back. And then very slowly lowered him down to the ground. And then until they calmed down. And then this happened a second time with a young woman who was like hurling her body against the doors trying to get out, and then got into like a pushing situation. Like she started pushing a staff member. And I saw it happen, and the staff tried to deflect her hands and back away from her. And when she kept coming at him is when somebody had to come in and restrain her and use the same technique. But by and large, and I actually talked to the guy there who recognized me from 4 years ago. Great dude. I asked him about what that process is like. He's like, well, our policy is we don't touch patients unless they're in imminent danger of harming themselves or harming others. And he trains the staff on how to abuse hurled at them all day. Because even the folks who were, I was there, everybody there where I was voluntarily admitted. But you don't have freedom to leave. You can, but it requires some effort. You can't just walk out the door. You can AMA out, which is against medical advice. We don't recommend that yet. But you can get out, as opposed to involuntary, where you're there for a length of time, and usually a judge has mandated it. And you can't leave, even if you want to, until you've either served the providers there have deemed you safe to leave. But still, people get pissed off, even in where I was, where it was voluntary. They would get pissed off and annoyed and want to leave and be kicking the doors and yelling and you can't hold us here and whatnot. And whatnot. But I guess for the most part, it was actually pretty chill. Intermittent yelling, intermittent crying, but pretty chill. So I thought I would share. It was actually pretty chill. Intermittent yelling, intermittent crying, but pretty chill. So I thought I would share my specific experience. They give us these tiny little composition books because we're not allowed to bring in anything that has staples in it. So I thought I would share my specific experience. They give us these tiny little composition books because we're not allowed to bring in anything that has staples in it because you can self-harm with those. And so here, and I took composition books because we're not allowed to bring in anything that has staples in it because you can self-harm with those. And so here, and I took notes. I basically had like a little journal where I wrote down my experiences. So I'm just kind of scrolling through it, trying to see where I want to start here. Give me just a second. There was one fellow whose plan was to starve himself so that he would die of a heart attack and he would be able to go to heaven because he's Catholic and he can't go to heaven if he dies by suicide. So his workaround is to starve himself to the point where he has a heart attack. Another woman, a young blonde woman, it was very evocative to me. It felt like something out of a movie, that she would stand in the corner rocking and singing "You Are My Sunshine" to herself quite a bit. Another patient had stepped in front of an 18-wheeler trying to die by suicide. They were with COVID, and one of them was yelling at the nurse, "You're treating us like we have a disease." And the nurse responded with, "You literally have a disease. You have COVID." And that woman actually AMA'd out, like left against medical advice because she couldn't handle being quarantined. My other woman, and was very unhappy about it because this other woman farted a ton and the room smelled like ass, and I felt really, really bad that me having COVID meant that she had to be stuck in a room that smelled like ass. These are just the joys of cohabitation. I think that would be the case in like a college dorm. You end up in ultimately, just FYI, 6 other people aside from me got COVID. So there were 7 out of a 30-person ward that had it. Let's see. Oh, also some notes about that I share in a minute. That before going to the ER the first time, my dad suggested that I try relaxing my muscles. Very useful, Father. I hadn't thought of that, and no other medical professional in the last 12 years that I've been struggling with this have thought of that either. Thank you for sharing. My mom also mentioned that because, they've asked me to move out. My folks have asked me to move out. You can hear all about that on episode 43, which has a big update on just like the status of my life. And I've been looking for a job for 4 years, and I like a job placement thing through the Department of Vocational Rehab. It's this whole thing. And so my mom told me about a friend who does part-time work that's kind of in my wheelhouse, like graphic design type stuff. And she does it as a contractor and is also disabled. And so mom was like, you should talk to her about how she does it. And I asked, does she make enough money to live off of? And my mom said, well, no, she has a husband who works full-time. Okay, well, here we are. Back to the ER, because I had gone to the ER for 22 hours, and then I went back a couple days later, and that's when they admitted me. My mom observed that, she's like, the last time I had a health crisis that had me go to the ER is because I was under stress. So maybe there's ways you could find to lower your stress. And I said, I'm open to suggestions. How do you suggest I lower my stress? And she said, you don't want to know what I would suggest, and walked away. And knowing my mom as I do, her suggestion would have been prayer. Or some other faith-related thing. And she and I do not share the same faith or beliefs. That's going to come up later. And then the night I got admitted to the psych hospital, I called my parents and said, hey, I'm sorry. The day isn't going as I had originally planned. And my dad said, well, when you mentioned death and wanting to die in the ER, this is what was going to happen. And I said, I didn't have another way of explaining how bad the pain was. And he said, you could have told them that your pain was extreme. And this is frustrating because he keeps thinking that there's a magical way I could communicate that would get my needs met. And he frequently treats me like a child who doesn't understand basic life skills. He assumes I didn't like a child who doesn't understand basic life skills. He assumes I didn't try everything else first. And, yeah. Whereas I'm frustrated, whereas I'm frustrated because I've tried everything else, and now I'm resorting to begging, and I'm still not listened to. So, on that happy note, let's get into it. So, I was admitted the evening of August 19th, a Tuesday. So now we have my journal entry from August 20th, my first full day there. It says, you would think that intense pain that triggers suicidal ideation would motivate doctors to address the pain with anti-anxiety and antidepressant meds. They've divorced the cause from the results and are treating me like I'm crazy instead of treating me like a person who needs pain management. It feels just like mom and dad who see my meltdowns and dismiss me as hysterical rather than considering that there's an underlying issue that needs to be addressed. The result is that I have to have my needs met. They're not asking the question, what circumstance could be so bad that suicide or self-harm seems like a viable option? They're not saying, hey, maybe we should address that circumstance, rather than slapping medication on the emotions. Fast forward to March 22nd, a Friday. Folks are getting COVID. I started to feel bad and wanted to low-key ask for a COVID test. I wrote a note to show the nurses station. I've got an intense sore throat and earache. I don't think it's COVID, but couldn't hurt to check. Then the nurses station sent me to the med window. That was closed, so I had to wait several hours. Then I showed my note to them during the station, and then one of the folks in the nurses station read my note at full volume. They said they couldn't test me unless I had a fever, which I didn't have. My roommate is feeling anxious about a woman's attempts to escape and was pacing back and forth in our room. She observed that I'm really good at self-soothing. Actually, just direct my anxiety inwards. I don't think that it's good that I do that. The following day, August 23rd. So several days ago, I went to the ER with pelvic pain, and I said that the pain was so bad it made me want to die. The social worker at the ER said that the pain was the result of trauma, and if the psych ward could treat my head, but I got here, and they started treating me for anxiety and depression without treating the underlying cause of either. I told the psychiatrist here what was going on, and he just nodded and walked away, just like my dad. Just walking away while I'm begging for help. My roommate was in the room during it, and after he left, she said, I don't get it. He believed me. Why doesn't he believe you? The day before, the meds gave me a raging headache. I've come down with some bug. My throat is super sore. My ears ache. All my joints ache. My lymph nodes in my hips are super inflamed. I feel like I've been hit by a truck. I didn't hardly sleep last night. I couldn't get any time where I'm guaranteed to be alone. My roommate is lovely, but I'm barely survive. I was even worse with a roommate. My depression and anxiety are increasing daily. My body hurts. Between my pelvic pain turning into constipation, turning into this fucking cold, I've had only about 6 hours when my body didn't hurt since I got here. I've been working around the clock to be upbeat and do all the groups and talk to all the staff, but I can't do it anymore. That patient trying to escape is banging into the doors and scaring the fuck out of me. Then later that day, I finally saw a doc. She checked my throat, ears, lymph nodes, temperature, all were normal. She did a COVID test just to be sure. I haven't heard the results. Then later that day, so I finally found out I had COVID. No staff told me. Bye, because she was moving rooms. All afternoon, no one came and told me. I had to ask multiple nurses before finally one would tell me. She was shocked no one had told me and was very apologetic. So that was a Saturday. Now we're fast forwarding to Monday. A new patient, a black man, got into it with a nurse, a white woman, respect and was yelling at her about it. She responded with, okay, big boy. This, of course, pissed the patient off more, and he started yelling, did you just call me boy? And now he's yelling at another nurse, a black man, and keeps repeating, you ain't acting like a king, you acting like a dictator, over and over. And he keeps misgendering the first nurse, calling her that man woman or that boy girl. And he keeps misgendering the first nurse, calling her that man woman or that boy girl. It's escalating. So that was Monday. Skip ahead 2 days. This is August 27th, a Wednesday. Wednesday. So now it's been a week that I've been there. When I got here, the standard daily questions were, what's your anxiety? 0 to 10. What's your depression? 0 to 10. Thoughts of suicide. Thoughts of hurting yourself or others. Are you hearing or seeing anything that's not there? Then just today, they added a new question. When did you last poop? Seeing anything that's not there? Then just today, they added a new question. When did you last poop? I asked the nurse why they have this new question. She said that someone had a historic run of constipation recently, so they've started screening for it. That was me. That's my legacy there. Then later that day, I say, when I finally got my voice back, oh yeah, I lost my voice for 2 days over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and wasn't able to make any phone calls. They were willing to bring a cell phone from the front desk so that I could make a call because I couldn't leave my room to use the phones that are bolted to the walls out front. So when I finally got my voice back on Monday, they let me use the front desk to call someone twice. So I called 2 people, and then yesterday I planned to call 2 other people, but they took the phone away after my first call and won't bring it back. Today I've asked for the phone all day and was never given it. Turns out they're supposed to have internet on it, and they're short-staffed, so they won't give me a phone. There's been no discussion or mention of another COVID test. Then later that day, the staff here rotates so often. I've told my pelvic pain story so many times and answered the same questions about it dozens of times. A new to me nurse came in. How's your anxiety out of 10? Me? I don't know, 6? Her. Depression? Me? 9? Her. That's great. Suicidal ideation? Me? Yes, I have suicidal ideation. Her. Self-harm or hurting others? Just me. Her. That? Me. Yes, I've been actively self-harming. Her. Yes, but do you intend to actually carry out your plan? Me. I'm literally self-harming. Today I self-harmed. She then looks at my scratches and says, okay, thanks, and exits. It's still unclear to me if there's any plan to do anything. Staff react in that way. Then later that day I say, for the last couple days I've been wondering what the protocol for a fire alarm would be here. Tonight I found out because we had a fire alarm. I learned that all the hallway fire break doors will close and magnetically lock automatically, and that only staff were blocked from accessing those doors because of fire. I would be locked in with unbreakable windows. Very reassuring. Then later I say, learned helplessness is a trip, man. Last night, my nurse was so useless as to be virtually pointless in answering any of my questions. He said no to all my requests or told me to ask someone else. Tonight's nurse, however, is incredibly helpful and keeps asking if there's anything I need. But after last night, I just stopped asking for things because I didn't figure it was worth it. I've been asking for throat lozenges for 3 days and finally gave up, but tonight's nurse just gave me 2, so she's better. Later I say, I asked the charge nurse how he stays positive. He says that he has a religious practice. He believes everything is already decided by Allah, and that whatever happens is what is supposed to happen. He said that some staff come for the money because they're well paid, but leave after a couple years. The staff takes a lot of abuse, and them get spit on, etc. He says he trains all the staff on how to interact with patients, and they only lay hands on patients when they're in imminent danger to themselves or others. I also asked him if he has any idioms from his home country, he's from Gambia, that he likes, and he offered these 2. An elderly person sees while sitting, cannot see. Which basically means that no matter how tall the young person is, or no matter how high an elevation they can stand, they don't have the wisdom that the elderly person has, no matter how short they are. And then another one he shared that I liked was, a tree, no matter how long it stands in the river, will never be a crocodile. Okay, so that was, what day was this? That was Wednesday. I'd been there a week. Now we're moving on to Thursday, August 28th. And I say, there's something really dehumanizing about being asked these screening questions with such neutrality. What day was this? That was Wednesday. I'd been there a week. Now we're moving on to Thursday, August 28th. And I say, there's something really dehumanizing about being asked these screening questions with such neutrality. Any plans of suicide? Any plans to hurt yourself or others? When I answer yes, they just jot it down and ask the next question. Something really dehumanizing about being asked these screening questions with such neutrality. Any plans of suicide? Any plans to hurt yourself or others? When I answer yes, they just jot it down and ask the next question. It's like they're a lifeguard asking, "Are you drowning?" And then when I say yes, they jot it down and walk away. Excuse me, what are you planning to do with that information? Plans to hurt yourself or others? When I answer yes, they just jot it down and ask the next question. It's like they're a lifeguard asking, "Are you drowning?" And then when I say yes, they jot it down and walk away. Excuse me, what are you planning to do with that information? Does it matter to you? You're in a position to do something about it and you aren't doing something about it. They're just drugging me. And you're in a position to do something about it and you aren't doing something about it. They're just drugging me instead of addressing the root cause. The psychiatrist here said that anxiety meds should help with the pain, but they aren't. Well, they should be helping, he says. Okay, great, but I'm operating in the realm of reality and what is actually happening? Not in the together, please. We already know my body's weird. I have autism. I didn't get any of the classic symptoms of COVID despite testing positive. So can we accept, please, that I'm abnormal and maybe not your normal, and maybe that your normal treatments won't work on me? But getting back to the dehumanizing thing, target behaviors to be taught or medicated out of doing. But my self-harm urges aren't intrusive thoughts. I have intrusive thoughts and I know what they feel like. This self-harm is different. It's a communication strategy. It's the thing that has people believe me. Of course, they react in all the wrong, unhelpful ways, bond with safety or comfort, but they do believe me. And it may be the only thing that has them believe me. And if that's what it takes for them to believe me, well, that's the problem, isn't it? That's the incentive that keeps me self-harming. It's literally the only thing I do that has anyone react with, "Oh my God, this is serious." Nothingness. Trauma, right? I hear you. Yeah, that's terrible. Have you had a bowel movement today? Moving on to Friday, August 29th. So I'd been here since the Tuesday prior. Like 2 Tuesdays prior. Solution to lower my stress, i.e. praying, is that allows her and Dad to totally absolve themselves of anything. It allows them to say, well, God is the only answer and the only solution. And Joy refuses to ask him for help, so clearly Joy refuses to be helped. It once again puts them in the position to know the right solution, interested in said solution as being unwilling to be helped. It's stubbornly negative, repackaged as spirituality. It absolves them of having to consider their solution might not actually work for me. It lets them avoid having to examine their beliefs. They can just keep moving the goalposts. Did you ask God for help? With the exact right words? Well, did you ask him with the right intention or motivation? Well, did you ask him with the right energy? Well, did you ask without any of the baggage or judgment that it's not at all justified for you to have, given the years of neglect and silence you've received from him? Well, did you ask with enough faith that he would answer? Can you imagine telling a baby that they won't get fed? Can you imagine a parent refusing to feed their kid unless the kid used exactly the right words? Honestly, I'm not interested in a relationship where I have to find the perfect way to communicate or else I won't be heard or have my needs met. It ends up feeling like I'm not supposed to have any of the normal, justified human reactions to my experiences. Like I'm supposed to keep my energy up even when I'm faced with unemployment, poverty, losing my health insurance, losing my housing, etc. Then later that day I say, it's tough to see these folks as insane, as government and tech companies surveilling us by monitoring our phones and using our cameras, and how sugar is in everything making people addicted. Because they have a point. The case manager who's doing my discharge paperwork said she walked all around the unit and kept walking past my room because she's looking for a 41-year-old, but only saw some 20s. She kept asking the charge nurse, "Are you sure that's Joy? I'm looking for a grown-ass human, and they look like they're my age." And the charge nurse says, "No, that's literally Joy." The caseworker is 28, and she thought that I also look 28. I'm not. I'm 41. I'm not. I'm 41. Incidentally, and this is not me reading my journal anymore, my roommate, briefly, for the time that we were roommates, asked what my age was and guessed at 28 and said that the only reason that she thought that I might be older was because during one of the groups I mentioned that I'd written a check before. She's like, oh wait, she can't be 28. Wear your sunscreen, kids. That's my PSA for today. Moving on, later in the day. This is still Friday. This is the day before I'm going to be sent home. It's funny, being in a place like this can turn one insane. I have COVID still. I had to ask 4 different people over the course of 6 hours to get my COVID test result. This is an aside. They had tested me again that Friday for COVID. I don't think I should be allowed to go home. My self-harm urges are off the charts. I've been working on giving myself a black eye. I'm using my tube of chapstick like a chisel, holding it against my cheekbone and hitting it as hard as I can with my other hand. Fork to scratch. It's not effective enough. All the plastic in this place is soft. Even the tubes on the markers I'm using, I checked. It won't yield a jagged or sharp edge when broken, so I scoured my room for hard plastic. The shower curtain clips are hard, so I snapped one in half and I can finally draw blood. The relief is so, which apparently I don't. Fuck ketamine. I can feel the swelling around my eye. It's getting bigger. This is what I mean by this place turning people insane. On the outside, I would just use a razor. But in here, I'm using the most bonkers things. In the psych ward in 2021, I snapped a comb. It's fucking bonkers. I've been asking to see a nurse for the last couple hours so I can beg them to let me stay. I'm getting close to having a total meltdown. And then I had a total meltdown. And this is an entry I wrote after that. Funny, I wrote that first entry today about Mom before I had the meltdown. And I didn't realize that asking for things here is like interacting with my dad, but I see that now. I have to resort to begging here in the same way I do with my folks, and I can hear the counter-arguments already. I can hear Dad asking if I ask the right people, because it's important in situations like this to identify the right people to ask. And when I inquired as to the right people to talk to, and I was still not helped. I can hear him say, well, did you say it in exactly the right way? With exactly the right words, in exactly the right tone, because it's important in situations like this to ask so that people will actually want to help you. Yes, Dad, as you know, weak-willed and stupid, and have no idea how basic human interaction works, given that I've only been navigating interpersonal interactions in my family, at school, at work, with friends, with the healthcare providers, etc. for 41 fucking years. But please, yes, tell me all about how to politely ask for my needs to be met in this mythical, magical way. So, that was Friday, and I really didn't want to be sent home because I was really worried about the extent of the self-harm that I was planning on doing. And I had exhausted all of my coping mechanisms just to survive being quarantined for 8 days alone. The solitude is not the problem, it was the being trapped in a room. And then being sent. The solitude is not the problem, it was the being trapped in a room. And then being sent home before I was ready to be sent home. And so I had a meltdown in front of the nurse, which mostly just involved me crying a bunch and showing him that I had sliced up my arms pretty bad. And he was very, very concerned. And he's like, I will make sure you talk to the psychiatrist. He'll be in tomorrow morning before you get discharged. And then the next morning, the psychiatrist didn't want to talk to me. And multiple staff members asked him, and he kept declining until finally he agreed. And his argument was, hey, look, we've treated your suicidal ideation, and that's really what we're here for. And we've done everything we can to try to address your pelvic pain. It hasn't helped. So what's next for you to do is go see your gynecologist and to get into an IOP or a PHP, which is an intensive outpatient program or partial hospitalization is basically a step down from the psych ward, where you go home at the end of every day, but you're there taking, DBT classes in group from like 9 to 5 every day for 5 days a week, like a full-time job. And you do that for like a month. It is like you meet 3 times a week for 3 hours doing DBT. And so his recommendation is that I go out, get discharged, and go do those things. And I said, well, I've been in DBT for like 8 years, man. The reason that I'm here is because what I'm dealing with is surpassing the skills that I have to deal with it. And I just need some place to keep me safe until my self-harm urges decrease. And he's like, nope, what's there for you to do is to use your skills out in the real world. And I said, I have been using my skills actively this whole time, in fact. And he's like, what skills have you been using? And I said, I just started listing off skills, like mindfulness, and box breathing and radical acceptance and dear men? I don't know what the plural of a dear man is. Dear man is. And he said, you're just naming skills. Have you actually used them? I'm like, well, yes, I have. Do you want me to demonstrate them to you right now? But he kept declining and said, no, you're going home today. And I asked, I know that folks who don't have a ride to pick them up the hospital will call them a taxi and will pay for them to go where they need to go. And I said, can you just switch having my folks come and get me and change it to a taxi taking me to the ER? And I was like, but you can though, right? It's not like you chiseled the directive into a piece of marble and sent it up high atop a mountain somewhere. It's a piece of paper. You can change that. And he declined. And I showed him that I had cut, and he still declined. And he's like, I know that your self-harm is a way to communicate the distress that you're in. And that's fine. And if you're in that much distress, go to the hospital. I'm like, I'm fucking in a hospital. I didn't say it. Why are you making me leave again? Anyway, he was immovable. And all of the staff there that I had talked to were very apologetic about the fact that I was going to have to leave anyway. And they were all like, yeah, we really wish this hadn't ended this way. We're so sorry. We tried as hard as we could to get him. And so yeah, my folks came and got me that morning. And then we went straight to the ER. And I was there. They dropped me off there. And I was there for about 3 hours and met with an amazing social worker. This time I was in the ER, the last 2 times. Was not as helpful. And this one was fucking great. She helped me come up with a safety plan. When I was there, I was nonverbal. That's not the right term. I can't remember I wasn't able to talk. I was having from my autism, so I was communicating on my phone to the front desk and then the triage nurse, and I had written out a big blurb explaining. Well, I can actually read it because I have it saved on my phone here. Please hold as I pull up my note. I'm having a mental health crisis. I need to be kept in a place where I can't hurt myself. My pronouns are they, them. I have autism and am in the middle of a verbal shutdown. I need to either keep my phone to communicate or I need something to write with and on. My emergency contact is my friend, and here's her number. I would like her to be discharged from a psych hospital after 12 days. I begged them not to discharge me, but they did anyway. I'm on day 9 of having COVID. I had a positive test last Saturday. and they retested me yesterday. It was positive still. I self-harmed yesterday, hoping that it would be enough to have them let me stay. My self-harm urges are extreme. I plan to use razor blades to cut myself. I have a printed list of my psych meds from the psych hospital. They're new to me, so I don't know what will happen if I go without them while I'm here. Yeah. So that's what I showed the triage nurse, and then the doctor came in with a social worker, and basically was like, yeah, we're going to have the social worker talk to you and kind of do an intake and see what's going on. And they had also seen my notes about my previous hospitalization with the pelvic pain, and I told them via typing on my phone, talk to you and kind of do an intake and see what's going on. And they had also seen my notes about my previous hospitalization with the pelvic pain, and I told them via typing on my phone that I wasn't in spasm at the moment. So my pain was low, but my suicidal ideation and my self-harm ideation, actually, strike that, with the pelvic pain. And I told them via typing on my phone that I wasn't in spasm at the moment. So my pain was low, but my suicidal ideation and my self-harm ideation, actually, strike that. My self-harm ideation was what was high. And the social worker was fucking awesome. But my suicidal ideation and my self-harm ideation, actually, strike that. My self-harm ideation was what was high. And the social worker was fucking awesome. She listened, or read rather, to me kind of explaining. The social worker was fucking awesome. She listened, or read rather, to me kind of explaining what I was up against. She asked what my home life situation was like, and I told her that, my parents' solution is to pray. And she kind of sat back and was like, and she asked what would need to be in place for me to be able to go home. And so I told her that I would need all the razor blades to be hidden, because that was the plan that I was fixated on. And then I would need my folks to take away my debit card so that and I don't have cash in my room. Sorry, I just got distracted. And then she asked, what instructions would I need to give your parents? And I said, they need to not ask any questions about my experience in the psych ward or at the ER. They need to not offer any suggestions or any fixes, or make any suggestions or ask any questions that are really fixes in disguise. Like, I'm not trying to fix anything, but have you thought of, frequently says. They're not reliable to actually know when they're fixing. They will insist they're not fixing while actively fixing. So she got on the phone with them and told them, what my safety plan was and what to say and what not to say. She told them, you're allowed to talk about movies and about the household projects and just day-to-day life, but do not ask about the psych ward. Don't ask about the ER trip or whatever. At the psych ward, I said, how do you stay positive? You're essentially bailing out a rowboat with a thimble while you're in the middle of a hurricane. How do you stay positive? And she said, what's the alternative hearing? And I have a hard time with that, because my experience of volunteering is like getting swallowed whole by a movement and working 17-hour days, because I'm the only person at an organization that can do the things area, or can learn to do it quickly. And so I end up filling a bunch of roles, and it's not sustainable. But she suggested a local LGBTQ youth organization. And that's where we look at me. I have a black eye I gave myself. I have cuts up and down my arms. Who would look at me and think, yeah, this is a person who should be giving advice to queer youth. And that brings us to the answer that she gave me, which was that, and you did exactly what you're supposed to do. Used every single skill you had available to you, and when your distress turned out to be greater than what your skills could manage, you took yourself to a hospital to keep yourself safe. And that's exactly what you're supposed to do. And I was like, God damn it, you just should there. And she went on to say, she's like, look, there are a lot of queer youth who are in your position, who have religious folks at home, who are in severe distress, who have mental health, who have religious folks at home, who are in severe distress, who have mental health struggles, and they don't have adults around them who have had to navigate, who have mental health struggles, and they don't have adults around them who have had to navigate the system, who are dealing with the things that they're dealing with. And who have had to navigate the system, who are dealing with the things that they're dealing with. And I'm annoyed at how good of a point that is, because like the people I trust, my inner circle, the folks that the people I trust, my inner circle, folks that I put together on a group chat while I was in the psych ward, so I could talk to, if I could only get one of them on the phone, I wanted them to be able to share that with the other 3 people. All of those people are neurodivergent. The reason I only wanted to talk to those people was because they're the ones who understand. There's a great book. Hold on, I'm going to pull it up. A great book called The full title is The Future is Disabled, Prophecies, Love Notes, and Morning Songs, written by Leah Lakshmi Pepsa Samarasina. It's a very long name, and I'm sure I butchered it. But they are a non-binary disabled person of color. I think. Let's look it up so I actually know what the fuck I'm talking about. Let's find out where they are from. They're Canadian. So they know some shit. And this book is great. It's I will say it's a lot. Because I think with all books that focus on social justice, they first paint the picture of what, especially for those of us who share that lived experience, because it's not like, it's less educational and more like a reminder of what our bodies are up against daily. But the reason I love this book is that the author talks about to be in queer. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned that they're also queer, disabled, neurodivergent spaces. And they focus also on spaces by and for people of color, people of the global majority I'm a part of. Because being around other folks like that, there's a shared understanding. And what seems mad to the rest of the world is actually like, oh yeah. Like I told my sister about how I self-harmed, and their first reaction was, well, that's creative. Like and it's, those are the people, that core group of 4 people were the people that I felt safe sharing. That core group of 4 people were the people that I felt safe sharing that information with. I didn't I knew that they weren't going to be like, oh my God, call the cops, you know? Because all of them are anti-cop. All of them are mad at themselves, mentally ill, and the way that mentally ill people care for each other, the way disabled people care for each other. Like I was talking to my other sister, Anne. Hi, Anne. The other day about how being disabled gives you so much more compassion for other disabled folks. You understand last minute cancellations. You understand like sudden health flare-ups that's like, oh yeah, I can't join you on. You understand that, hey, like my head injury is such that I can't actually do any more screen time today, so I'm signing off. You understand, hey, I can't talk on the phone right now. I'm actually having a verbal shutdown. Can we just type? An understanding of what can you do? And hey, let me meet you where you're at. It's the understanding, and this is an example that the author, Leah, I'm so sorry, I should know that. Leave it on your porch. Like without the expectation of, hey, can I come in and socialize? And I felt really awful that I wasn't able to talk to all of like my close circle every day. That some days, I mean, there were multiple days that I wasn't given a phone at all. There were other days where I didn't know how many phone calls I was going to be allowed to make. So I just picked somebody and started there. And I felt really bad that I couldn't talk to everybody every day and let them know. But in talking to that core group of 4 people since I got out, everybody was like, oh yeah, the group chat was fucking great. Like since I got out, everybody was like, oh yeah, the group chat was fucking great. Like we were able to calm each other down. We were able to give suggestions. We were like, when you were having your meltdown on your last night there, like we were able to brainstorm like other ways to get you help. And the suggestions given by other disabled, mad people. And I use that the term mad with like a reclamatory sort of energy. And that's a word I got and that's a word I got from the Futures Disabled as well. The types of ideas given by people who are not mentally ill, who have not experienced trauma, who are not disabled, are usually bootstrappy ideas of like, you know, just focus on the good things in your life. Or like, you know, try harder. And I'm like, dude, I am here because I'm trying as hard as I fucking can, and it's still not enough, and I need extra support. So, psych hospitalizations are treated as like a concession or a defeat of like, oh, you couldn't hack it, so you ended up in a psych ward. And I'm like, the messaging out in the world is ask for help if you need it. I asked for help from my support team, and I asked for help from my medical team, and when that wasn't adequate, I asked for help at the ER, and when that wasn't adequate, they sent me to a psych hospital so I could have around-the-clock care. Feeling the judgment, the vibe from my former partner who broke up with me the day after I got out of the psych ward the second time. Yeah. And kind of the anticipation of how people who are not mentally ill, who are not disabled, view psych hospitals. So yes, like having a core team is key. And then like what my social worker at the ER said about, getting involved with other people, helping other people in a similar situation, doing what you can. Helping other people in a similar situation, doing what you can. And I had a very long call with my sister Anne yesterday. And we were talking about, like, I've been seeing a lot of therapists and psychiatrists on social media, sharing about how a lot of the usual stuff, a lot of the usual techniques, a lot of the usual modalities of therapy aren't really working right now for a lot of really marginalized folks. Because person look around and go, oh, let's check the facts. It's not really as bad as I fear that it's going to be. But right now, a lot of things are as bad as we feared they were going to be. And so a lot of anxiety and depression, how things are being deregulated, defunded. Whole communities are being rounded up and deported or locked up in concentration camps. How do you look at the future and not think it's hopeless? To see how therapy evolves to address that. With the hope that therapy does evolve to address that. And I know that there are a lot of therapists who are very bought into the Western, European way of like beliefs around psychology, European way of like beliefs around psychology, and it's very bootstrappy, and they're going to stay that way. But there's also a lot of therapists who are out to decolonize therapy. And I'm going to put a link to happy, and they're going to stay that way. But there's also a lot of therapists who are out to decolonize therapy. And I'm going to put a link to some of my favorite content creators who are decolonizing therapy. I'll put a link to them in the description. Therapy. And I'm going to put a link to some of my favorite content creators who are decolonizing therapy. I'll put a link to them in the description. And decolonizing therapy. I'll put a link to them in the description. And their goal is, around like supporting community care, bolstering being able to find community and being able to thrive in community. So how to interact, how to communicate, how to set up boundaries for yourself, how to communicate your needs effectively. And I think also a lot of the benchmarks for what a successful life is like is very, we're still dealing with the holdovers of, you're supposed to go to college together, and then you have your 2.5 kids and your dog, and you work at your job for 30 years or whatever, and then you get your pension and you retire and you get a mobile home or an RV rather, and you travel, you go on cruises, you do your vacations, you play. And that's not the way it's going anymore, but there's still kind of like Western psychology is still really, really focused on creating effective members of the workforce. A lot of the diagnostic criteria for a lot of mental illness on some level of you having a job. And so I think as these pioneers of decolonizing therapy, like I think what they're focusing on, they're focusing less on making sure people are meeting those kind of adulthood and moving away from those kind of long-term goals into focusing on acknowledging the now and the making the less by the pedestalizing of these other big life goals, getting married, buying a house, having a job, all of that, having kids. And so the way my sister and I signed off our phone call last night was, what is the smallest possible win that you can celebrate and give a ton of weight to? Like, let's look for the smallest unit of pleasure. And that's a fun game, is because I think as adults we downplay a lot of those things. There's the idea of, well, you should be doing that already, so why are you celebrating like a thing you should be doing already? You should already be eating food every day. Why are you celebrating that you're eating? You should already be showering. That's a given. But I think in the world that we have now, especially for marginalized folks, especially for folks who are experiencing the intersection of a variety of marginalizations, celebrating those things is, and this is weird. I acknowledge this is weird, and it feels weird in my body to be looking for optimism or looking for the positive, because I myself am fairly dour and depressed. But look, myself am fairly dour and depressed. But looking for those wins and treating those wins, those little successes, those little bits of joy as big, I think is, but looking for those wins and treating those wins, those little successes, those little bits of joy as big, I think is where hope lives. I get to choose what those are. The looking big, I think, is where hope lives. I get to choose what those are. The looking is a fun game anyway. Partially because I chose it. I would never enforce. The looking is a fun game anyway. Partially because I chose it. I would never enforce it on somebody else and be like, oh, you're having a meltdown right now? Well, why don't you name 3 things you're happy about? Like, fuck that, and fuck anyone who does that. But I get to choose just most insignificant thing and make it significant. That tiny little thing. Hey, I pooped yesterday. Go me. That's a big deal. If you've ever gone 8 days without taking a shit, I looked like I was loaded, and I felt so fucking awful. It was like a bowling ball was sitting on my pelvic floor, which wasn't helping matters. So I pooped this morning, actually. Double go me. That's very exciting. Those are my thoughts after the psych ward. And my hope is that anyone who listens to this who's never experienced a psych ward has a better understanding of what it's like and sees the people who they are. Like, I hope that you're listening of this episode, but also all my other episodes, that the thing that you get is that I am human. And that for episode specifically is that you get that the folks that I've mentioned in the psych ward are also human, deserving of care and compassion. And that also, like, nobody ends up there apropos of bootstrap ideology does. is it divorces the context, the circumstances from the people's behavioral reactions. Like, I think a lot about the similarity of the folks in the psych ward to people trying to get an airport around Christmas or Thanksgiving. The behavior that you see of travelers talking to airline staff at the check-in desks around the holidays is the same behavior that I saw in the psych ward. People are super stressed. They're short-tempered. They're making demands. They are disappointed because they have a lot riding on something, like being able to make that flight. And they're pissed as hell that something's gotten that flight. And they're pissed as hell that something's gotten in their way. They have used up all of the patience that they have at their disposal. And now they're yelling or crying or threatening or getting into physical altercations. And none of that behavior is helpful. It doesn't get them what they need. But I guess my point is there's not a lot of difference. Between those folks and the folks in the psych ward. I think the difference is in the psych ward, everything's public. There's no privacy there. You're not allowed to shut your door. You're trapped in there with other people in a fairly small scene rooms. You don't have privacy. So if you're going to have a meltdown, everybody sees it. If you're crying, everybody hears it. If you're just bebopping along in the hallways, singing a song because you're listening to wireless headphones, or you're just you've got a song stuck in your head, everybody notices. The things we do in private, and just be singing to ourselves in the shower or in the kitchen. And outside of the psych ward, we're allowed to keep those things private. But if you're in a psych hospital, there is no privacy. You're doing it in front of other people. Which means you get a woman standing in the corner, rocking to herself and singing, "You Are My Sunshine." Their rope, who've exhausted every single resource that they have available to them. They've exhausted all their coping skills. So all you're getting is everybody's unfiltered behavior. And it's messy. Because, of course it is. And of course, you also have people with actual psychoses. Cannot tell what's real. People who have auditory visual hallucinations, people who are hearing voices, people who are seeing things that aren't there, people who have dissociative identity disorder. You have all of that in a psych hospital, but you also have all of that out in the world. It's likely that your cashier at your grocery store has mental illness and is medicated for it or treated for it. It's likely that your bus driver has a mental illness that they're medicated or treated for. It's likely that your mail carrier or your neighbor or your kid's teacher or your own doctor or your neighbor or your kid's teacher or your own doctor, your own therapist, your neighbor, your cousin has a mental illness and is medicated for it. And because of the amount of stigma that we have around mental health in this country, and I think throughout the world, a lot of those folks don't feel the freedom to share that information. But I think a lot about Harvey Milk. For those who don't know, he was a gay rights activist. And gay himself, in the 70s in San Francisco, California, United States, the earth, the world. And one of his big things that he advocated for was for gay folks to come out of the closet, because he thought that a big reason that straight people could other gay folks, could be you're over there and you're gross and you're weird, is because is because they saw so few gay people, and they didn't realize how many gay people, queer people are out in the world that they know already, that they like already, that they like already. And so he was advocating that like teachers and pastors and nurses and sanitation workers and neighbors and families and friends come out to their communities. Because if you notice that queer people are everywhere and they are so varied, it's stereotype them. And I think, similarly, mentally ill folks are everywhere. There are a lot of mentally ill people in our world, and a lot of them are able to get the help that they need. And then you have a lot of folks who are not able to get the help that they need. And it's not for lack of asking, begging to stay at the psych hospital, begging for help. And I was told no. I was begging to be allowed to stay because I was so scared of what I would do self-harm-wise if they let me out. And they insisted that I go. So I went straight from the hours there talking to an amazing social worker and came up with a safety plan so I could go home. But by and large, folks will ask for help. And you don't allow for community resources, there's nowhere for folks to go. So yes, I hope my goal of this episode to destigmatize it, because it's rough. One of my friends was saying that it seems like mentally I'm worse off now than I was now, and there are aspects that are better. One of the wonky, very weird silver linings is part of the reason that I self-harm is as a communication tool to get people to believe me and to allow me to get the help that I need. And historically, that's what's happened. I self-harm, and people go to self-harm and have the psychiatrist go, nope, that does not move me in any way, shape, or form. Out you go. That's probably good. That's probably useful feedback to that behavior, and helpful to it. It didn't reinforce it, which is good. And there are other good things that came out of it. I'm not mad about COVID, honestly. I'm not mad about getting COVID because I got, and there are other good things that came out of it. I'm not mad about COVID, honestly. I'm not mad about getting COVID because I got a room to myself, and that was good. I don't know how I would have survived having to share a room with someone. I'm not mad about getting COVID because I got a room to myself, and that was good. I don't know how I would have survived having to share a room with somebody who liked to talk. And she was lovely, lovely human. And I still didn't want to have how I would have survived having to share a room with somebody who liked to talk. And she was lovely, lovely human. And I still didn't want to have random conversations constantly. And also by and large, the staff was good. The psychiatrist I did not care for. I do not like him. But most of the staff was great. And are there to legitimately, they want to help. Any of the ways, there was the one dude who was totally fucking useless, who just wanted to sit in a chair outside my door and not move or answer any questions. But everybody else was super eager and very much like, hey, I want to make sure you have what you need. And they're all, and There's never enough time. So it's not a perfect system. It's not even close to a perfect system. And of course, I don't think any privately run health facility is, because it's always going to be about profit, and profit-driven healthcare is always going to fail in key aspects of it. But yeah, I honestly think it's hard to give how my time was. And I really would want to break it down. And I can't even say here's how the staff was, because I want to give particular kudos. Like the sanitation team, they came in and actually sanitized my entire room. I've got all my protective gear, and you can watch me do my thing. And I'm like, oh, great, because I love cleaning videos on Instagram, like reels of people cleaning like disastrous houses or pressure washing or cleaning rugs. All of that stuff is just like my total jam. So I was and they like what do you call it? They sanitize the walls, the ceiling, every fucking surface gets wiped down. The mattresses get wiped down, the pillows get wiped down. She picks up the mess down the desks and the side, like all of it gets wiped, and the floors. And that was like really fucking reassuring. She's like, this is what we do between, anytime we have, people moving out of a room before we put new people in it. This is what we do. And I was like, that's actually really reassuring. This is what we do. And I was like, that's actually really reassuring that you're that thorough. And yeah, there were a lot of staff that were really fucking incredible, very compassionate, very concerned, and they deal with so much abuse. There's a lot of yelling and screaming. There's a lot of accusations being hurled around. And clearly they're not perfect. But yeah, I want to give a big shout out to a lot of the staff members there who are doing the absolute best they can in a broken as fuck system, which is also true of the patients there. We're also doing the best we can in a broken as fuck system. So that's what I got. And I will put some accounts, Instagram account, content creator information in some amazing people who are decolonizing therapy. All right, so that's the end of that, and I'm just gonna do my usual thing and end this super abrupt. This has been Let's Therapize That Shit, with your host, me, Joy Gerhard. Subscribe and tell your friends about it. I'll see you next time. Intro and outro music is Swan Lake Opus 20 by Tchaikovsky, performed by the London Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Anatoly Fistulari, and released on LP by Richmond High Fidelity London Records in 1952.